He was, as again, just to remind you, he was there for the very beginning when it all started, and managed the design team for the original Viper and the GTS. So you were there as one of the beginning forefathers. You want to just tell us about how the Viper got started? Because you were there from like before it was even a car, right? And is there a mic right there? Yeah.
Well, thanks, Maurice, and just add my thanks to you, because your enthusiasm is what's provided all of this. So I always look up to you. The start of Viper was really, I'd say, the credit goes not only to us in design, but Bob Lutz. He had an Autocraft Cobra, if you know what those guys are, and he was enthralled with that. But he wanted to do a two-seat sports car, and so he was a champion for just about anything. It didn't matter what, crazy or not. I mean, he was really a great champion, and a champion for design. And I think he really wanted to be a designer, even though he was kind of a marketing guy. And but anyway, Bob had talked to me several times about doing a two-seat roadster and a car that was kind of inspired by Cobra. And I honestly think he didn't think I was listening, because we had started packaging, and of course there wasn't anything going on anywhere else in the organization other than just between Bob and design. And so one day after officers council meeting, which was always Monday morning, he calls me in his office when we were walking back the 5th floor down Highland Park, and he calls me and he says, I really want to do a Cobra 2-seat roadster. And I said, well, I know you think we haven't been listening, but I said, I already started the packaging, so our next walkthrough, I'm going to walk you through this. And so we had sketches, some of those original Craig Durfee sketches that you guys have seen, and a lot of others. And plus, I had the packaging, and so I had Neil Walling, who was the director of advanced design at the time. I said, let's take him through the package. So we packaged the V10. It was a truck engine at the time, but we packaged the V10. We had the manual behind it, and kind of rudimentary suspension layout, which was concept car suspension layout, which you guys would laugh at. But so he was amazed, and so I said, I really want to build one of our concept cars for Detroit next year. And we were coming off the heels of the Portofino, the Lamborghini Portofino debut we had in '87, and we brought that car back to Detroit for '88. So I said, I want to do this for '89. And so we were off and running. And so I started up an outside studio. I didn't want to do it in-house. And the outside studio, about a month later, I took him out and we had a full-size clay model. And he was just thrilled to see it going. But the car basically looked as you see it now, because I wasn't going to let the guys deviate from the sketch. I said, make it look like the sketch, because always you get something practical that was, getting an oracle in it or something weird. And so I said, no, we're going to make it look like the sketch. And so we did. And of course, he wanted, back to basics, and wanted something, what about a roof? We don't need a roof. And, it was those kind of things. What about windows? We don't need those. And so, so it was like, well, okay. And so that made our job, pretty easy in a way. It made your job hard, guys. But, well, today I am. Today, I'm going to be an engineer today. But anyway, that's how it got started, Maurice. Maybe a longer answer than you wanted, but Bob deserves the credit. I just give him all the credit in the world.
Well, thanks, Tom. Let's move to Gen 5 design. So Mark Trosso came in. So for any of you who aren't aware, Viper went through 5 generations. There was the Gen 1, which was the red Roadster. Well, it wasn't just red, but the Roadster that you see with the sport cap. Then we had the Gen 2, when the coupe came out. And then the Gen 3 was a more angular design. Gen 4 was an evolution of that. And then Gen 5 was totally different, and it went back to kind of the Gen 2 look, but a lot sleeker. And Ralph Gilles is the one who really resurrected the Viper at that point, because it had ended production and he brought it back to life. And Mark was in charge of the exterior design studio. So anybody who's ever read about Vipers usually has heard the quote that Ralph gave you, like, I wanted to be sexy like Halle Berry naked on the beach, right? That was the famous quote. So I'm sure there was a little more detailed design brief than that on what your objectives were. So can you tell us a little bit about what you were trying to achieve with this new design?
Sure. And I have to say that 1989 was my first year of design school, and the cars that Tom and the team were doing, specifically the Viper, were really what made me want to be at the company known as Chrysler at the time. I mean, that was just, you know, so far out there, and just really resonated with young people, and of course me too. So for me to be able to end up working on the Gen 5 Viper with having that car inspire me when I was younger was just awesome. So, but the team, we were coming out of bankruptcy at the time when Ralph assembled the team. So we did it very low key. We didn't want to make a big deal out of it because, you know, we were all focused on trying to right the company, if you will, but we knew that we wanted to continue and bring back this, you know, halo vehicle for the brand. So we assembled about a group of 5 of us and started doing some sketch work on it. And we did what I call bookending of the design. We did some things that were very radical, but then we did some things that what I wanted to make sure we did, along with Ralph, was capture the essence of that original Gen 1, Gen 2 car, just the voluptuousness of the surfacing of it. Get back to that hood that opens up heroically, as I like to say, and capture that spirit and just the soul of that original car from a design standpoint. So we looked at a lot of different things, but in fact, I remember her being in the studio and having discussions, you, me, and Ralph, about where should we go, what should the theme look like. So Herb actually, even though he's an engineer, had a very good eye on it and helped guide us on that. It was a very exciting time for sure. And ultimately, getting to the point where we created a model that maybe some of you saw at Salt Lake City as well, and that we showed to Sergio Marchioni at the time, who absolutely loved it, and the rest is history now.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I don't see Dick yet, so let's move on to engineering. Herb Helbig, as we said, is the Grail keeper. But basically his job was to, as I said earlier, was to make the car feel like a Viper. I mean, it drives like a Viper because of how Herb defined the character, right? But maybe you can just enlighten us on how you got the name Grail Keeper and sort of what led to that, why you got that name.
I'll give you the short version of the story, because I could probably talk for an hour on that one, but I just wanted to say welcome everybody to be here. It's always gratifying for us to be able to talk to the Viper Nation, so we're so happy to see you guys. So Grail Keeper, I didn't come up with that. Somebody laid that on me. A guy's name was Conrad Groh, who lived in Florida, and a good buddy of John Malve's, of course, and mine. And when we went to the DOI in Florida, down at Disney World, I forget exactly which one it was now. In the course of the production of the car over the years, you know, there was always things that people want to change. They want to add stuff, and they want to make things different, and they, you know, want to change the car out. And the car was such a great grouping of bits and pieces. As Tom said the other day, it had a special essence. It captured everybody. And I wanted to preserve that, because people were so knocked out of the car. I mean, they were fanatical. You guys know, you're the fanatics. So when people would come to me and they would say, you know, it would really be nice if we had cruise control. What? Cruise control? Get the F out of my office. I'm not doing that. And then they would say, well, you know, we need to have 2 different brake packages. One that's an economy brake package and the regular one. I said, are you crazy? This car's all about performance. You're going to put some weenie brake package on it? That's nuts. Out of my office. And then, of course, the big one. You know, we could sell a lot more cars if we had an automatic transmission. And I'm like, if I had a gun, they would be dragging your sorry ass out of my office. The truth of the matter is, though, I had a kind of like a special get out of jail card in my back pocket, because what they didn't know, and I'll share it with you guys, is in order to put an automatic into the car, we're going to have to make major frame changes to fit it in, to get an automatic that was bulletproof enough to run behind Dick's V10. So I would always say, well, you know, it's going to take $1 bazillion in development and tooling to do it, and it would blow the business case right out of the water, and we'll have no Viper at all. Now, is that what you want? No Viper at all, or an automatic? And I'm like, oh, okay. So, fast forward to the DOI in Florida, and Conrad and some of the guys in his club presented me with a plaque, and it had my name on it, and it said Herb Helbig, keeper of the Holy Grail, Grail keeper for Viper. And believe it or not, they had a screenshot from the Indiana Jones movie about the Grail. I don't remember exactly the name of it now. And it was a picture of the knight who's guarding all the cups in the cave. And the shot that they took, no, it's just one of those serendipitous things. The shot looked exactly like me with a chain mail. And I'm like, how did you do this? They said, well, we just took it out of the movie. Go watch the movie. So I did, and I'm like, holy shit, that looks just like me. So that's where the Grail Keeper moniker came from. And then, you know, I continued to beat the drum about, you know, keeping the car true to its roots, back to basics, scary fast, absolutely the pinnacle of performance for you folks that wanted that. And I got to tell a quick story about what Mark said. You know, I was very, very humbled that Ralph and Mark asked me to come in and look at the sketches of the new car. And, you know, they had the exterior and the interior, and in the interior, it had a little picture of a cup holder. And I'm like, what? A cup holder? No way, you can't do that. They said, well, you know, it's, you know, time's moved on. I'm like, you know, well, okay, I'm retired. I can state the claim, but they did make it so you could take the cup holder out. So I took that as a small victory. But they did such an awesome job on the new car. You know, people kept asking us, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next to up what was there before? And the Gen 5, just an absolute killer, blew me away. So there's the Grail Keeper story for you.
I think your other weapon in your back pocket was that Bob Lutz supported, you know, what you were supporting what Bob Lutz wanted, which was a back to basics car. But then when he left,
it always helps when the president of the company is right with you 100%, like that. You know, it's like, well, you know, if you really got a problem with me, you can talk to Bob. I'm like, oh, okay, we're not doing that.
but when Bob left, didn't he give you some words of wisdom, which then, because you kept the Grail thing going for generations after that, but when he left, I recall he gave you some advice, like what the car needed to remain, right?
He had a very special relationship with our team, to the point where Bob would call us up when we worked at JTE, and it'd be a Friday afternoon and my phone would ring. Herb? Yeah? This is Bob. I'm like, Bob? Oh, Bob? Bob? Says, yeah, how's it going? And he wanted to know what we were doing, and he wanted to make sure that his vision was not going to be violated. He wanted the car to be back to basics, and he wanted to make sure that we were, you know, staying on the path. So he told me when he left, he said, you know, this car is a 1 in a million. There'll never be another one like it. Don't mess with the formula because it's perfect the way it is. Well, there you go.
Thanks. Okay, then after Gen 3, 4, and Gen 4 was sort of supposed to be the end of Viper, we brought back Gen 5, and Eric Hoychley became the guy that brought the vehicle components together and had to continue making a Viper be a Viper. And you know, the Viper, it leveraged a lot of the old car in terms of the chassis and the components and that type of thing, but you had to take it to another level, right? So, and I should mention that Eric is not only responsible for Viper, but he was responsible. He was vehicle dynamics manager for all of SRT products. So if you own a Challenger or a Charger or a TRX or a Demon or a Hellcat, he's the guy that did that. So can you tell us a little bit about what you wanted to do to improve Viper performance in terms of handling and maintain the character of the car?
Yeah, so Mike Scheindling and I were kind of into building road mules back then, which were not approved, didn't ask, because varying levels of management didn't like us building road mules, because, well, you're taking resources from this and this, they can never prove it, right? And they got done in after hours or in the back, or people didn't really know. So we actually, before the program was even approved, we built a Gen 4. We took a Gen 4 and put kind of the big hitters we wanted to put on the Gen 5 if we got to do it, which was flipping the rear knuckles around, in the simplest form, and making the rear end just a little more stable, depending on as the loads went up, and widening the front track, which you'll see on the race cars. If you look at the original Viper, and I'm not criticizing, it's just the front track, the smaller tires, and it's narrower. So if you look at the outside edge of the tires, which you're driving around with the limit, the track width front and rear is the same. That just gave the front more grip and more authority. We revised the steering, we revised the shifter, we put electronic shocks on it. I think we actually had a prototype stability control system on it because it was regulatory. We had to have stability control, for 2012 and 2015. So yeah, we drove that thing around, and the X-Brace. The X-Brace was a tough sell. Dick didn't even want it because it covered his beautiful engine. But we closed the box. If you looked at the chassis stiffness, there's really a hinge there at the base of the windshield, and the GTSRs had it. So we had a GTSR, actually it was a complicated X-Brace fabbed on, and it was an easy sell once I just ran it with the bolts loose and let everybody drive it around the Henley track, and then we tightened Tom Odell and I tightened it up, and everybody was sold. So it was an evolution, but it was pretty fun, and I got criticized, by Edmunds or something when the Gen 5 came out because the media guy was still scared shitless of the car, even though it had stability control. And I got interviewed in PR got and I told him, you should be scared of driving a Viper. It's not, the stability control is not going to drive the car for you. It's just there to save your ass. So it allowed a lot of wheel slip. It allowed the car to move around a little bit under you. It wasn't like what GM was doing with the Corvette and limiting your torque, locking the car down so you could drive like an idiot. And I think that's one of the things we really tried to keep. I talked to her a bit about stability as well. So it was just there if you were in trouble. And I think we did that right. As far as, I was just in love with the car once I saw what design came up with, because I've always been kind of a Gen 2 coupe guy, right? And to bring that back and bring back the clamshell hood was really special. So, but it is truly, it's a bigger evolution certainly than between Gen 3 and Gen 4, but it's still an evolution of that car, which maintained its vibrance.
Cool, thanks. Some of you may or may not know, Ralph hired me to write the book about the development of the Gen 5 Viper. So for 2 years, I followed the engineering team around as they developed this new car, and I got to take my camera places that cameras had never gone before. And I followed Eric. Eric and I spent a lot of time together, and I got to see what they go through cold weather testing in Bemidji, Minnesota in the middle of winter, and hot weather testing on Dante's Peak in the middle of summer where it was 120 something degrees, right? And these guys are inside the car driving, but I'm outside taking the pictures. So I got to spend a lot of time seeing the brutal environments that they go through to bring this car to life. And it's not very glamorous, but it's a lot of work, but it was worthwhile, so. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to manufacturing for now. So the Viper was unlike any other car Chrysler did at that time, right? if you remember, they were building K cars and minivans, right? The Viper was nothing like that, and suddenly they're going to build a low-volume production car to sell for $50,000, which was way higher than anything else they sold. And it was going to be low-volume, hand-built kind of car, and that required a whole different type of manufacturing for them. And Frank was there at the very beginning. I think I met him at the very first invitational. We got a tour of the plant, and I wouldn't leave because I was asking questions, and I guess he noticed that. So anyway, can you tell us about the early days of manufacturing, what the challenges were in trying to bring a hand-built car to life in a company that was structured to build mass production?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Maurice. Starting out in 92 with the Viper, Chrysler didn't even have a place to build it yet. One of the assets that they took was what was the previous Mack Avenue stamping plant, which became the Mack Avenue warehouse, and that's exactly what it was full of, was stored company assets. So that had to be cleaned out, gutted, and an assembly process had to be put in place. And once that kind of got started, you had to get a workforce. And there was a core team of, I want to say, 8 craftspersons that were selected and interviewed from other Chrysler facilities. And those were the technicians who actually built the vehicle. And obviously, it was a very unique process because they were hand-built vehicles. No one was building hand-built vehicles in the United States. Corvette was mechanized and a true assembly process, whereas the Viper, it was an indexing line. The vehicle stopped in each station, and I believe that originally there were 22 stations, 9 in chassis and 11 in trim final, building the vehicle start to finish. And that was quite a complex process. You don't think it's that difficult, but these were all hand-built. They were all different. They were all unique. They all went together differently. We started out obviously with only red, and then added black, and then the complexity really started in the 94 model year with 4 exterior colors, red, black, yellow, green, and the two interior colors, tan and gray. Every single person who was a technician at Mack Avenue, they had the skill set to build handcrafted vehicles. And they were pulled from all the Metro Detroit assembly plants, interviewed to be able to be a craftsperson. And we went from building 2 vehicles a day up to 16, 17 vehicles a day. But those were the most difficult 16 or 17 units you could possibly imagine when they're all hand-built vehicles. The team concept was something totally new to the auto industry, and that was 1992 as far as the shop floors. Now every shop floor across the United States, it pretty much has the team concept where the decision-making process is at the lowest levels. And I remember many of the craftspersons working with you, Herb, and the team out there, Sandy, Ken, to solve problems. And that's exactly what the company wanted. It wanted to streamline and get efficient and get the technicians working with the engineers and the manufacturing people to resolve problems and to get the car built. And that's what we have right now in the Class A assembly plants. The team concept grew and grew, and now it's across the entire United States. Simple processes, simple tooling, which generated ultimate driving experience and a very, very beautiful car. Every single one of them handmade, every single one of them unique, but all beautiful.
I don't know if we should admit this, but I remember you telling me stories about running to Home Depot to get screws because there weren't the right screws.
Yeah, I can't confirm or deny.
Would you say that, how would you contrast the original RT10 production start with the startup of Gen 2, you know, that at the second time around, basically?
Well, it was much smoother the second time around because we kind of gotten used to building handmade vehicles. The coupe had its unique challenges with the roof panel, but the frame toe box, rear clip, that was far improved and superior to what the launch of the Roadster was. And that car went relatively well in the build process.
Big change.
Big change.
Mark, I know you're a design guy, but maybe you can just answer this question for a Gen 5 thing, but when Gen 5 came out for manufacturing, the Gen 5 Viper the interior went way up in quality, right? I mean, you guys own them. They were hand wrapped. They were designed to be hand wrapped leather interiors, and that required a whole different manufacturing process. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Thank you. Yeah, as far as the process goes, probably not so much. We in design, we always say whatever costs the most is what we're happy with, which usually doesn't go over well with our manufacturing friends, but we're always trying to push the envelope as far as materials and fit and finish. And that truthfully was the big push for us. Tome Jovanovski was the lead designer on the interior. And he just did an amazing job. And it was all about craftsmanship in that car. We did, as we do in a lot of, low volume builds, we try and rate the parts bin, if you will, to make the car cost effective. But we try to do it in a way that you all wouldn't recognize it or be offended by that. But it really came down to craftsmanship and using those leathers and materials to really take the interior to another level. Somewhat counter to what the original Viper intent was, but at the time we thought that was something that we would be able to, it would resonate with new customers and our current customers as well.
You had to find a company in the U.S. to do leather wrapping, because that's not something that's normally done, in leather, at least not at the time, wasn't done in America, right?
Yeah, I can't remember the memory of a goldfish, but I don't remember exactly what company that was.
Well, read my book if you want more details.
I'll go back and read it again too.
I can talk to something we got to do. We got to, on the engineering side, we got to go to Italy, to Maranello, and we talked to Ferrari about how they do it. And if you unwrap some Ferrari interior parts, they don't look that great. But they don't have to look that great, right? When they're covered in leather and hand stitch and all that. But I remember, I just one story I want to tell because I'm getting old and old guys tell stories. So we're sitting with Ferrari and we're going through each component of the interior and the exterior too, how they put the Gran Turismo based 8C together too, because that was a carbon fiber body car as well. So we're going through the interior and we're getting the seats, and this young woman engineer comes in to talk about the Ferrari seats and how they do them. And it's 2010, we hadn't sourced the Sabelt or anything yet. We did talk to Sabelt on that trip, and she comes in and she says, well, we have 3 seats for the world market. We have our small seat for the Asian countries where they're generally smaller people, and we have our medium-sized seat for the Europeans and pretty much the rest of the world. And for America, we have the large seat because all of you Americans are pregnant with your fat bellies. And I don't know if she was trying to insult us or not, but we just cracked up. That was hilarious. And I think she was actually trying to insult us because she didn't laugh that much around with us. But oh my gosh, that was a fun trip. And so we took some of the things, seeing how Ferrari did it when we developed the supplier. I don't remember the name, but they were down something that before up 275. We're doing the seats and some of that stuff, and they were hand doing everything.
Just kind of a fun fact. You mentioned the Alpha 8C, and there was an engineer at the time who actually, because we had started looking at developing, the chassis from the Gen 4 car. How can we continue to evolve that? But I don't know if you remember, we did a study at doing a Viper based on the 8C.
Yeah, you couldn't get big enough tires.
Oh,
There's
yeah,
no way.
proportions, it just,
Yeah, it's all wrong.
it fell apart big time, but we spent probably a month or so looking at it, so it was almost based on that. And I think cost even was part of why we walked away from it, because of the carbon tub.
But that body buck at the plant, for people who went through the plant, was when it was still there for the Gen 5s, is a similar process to what Alpha did on the carbon fiber body for the 8C. You could build every single body panel on that perfect, CNC machined, frame and attachment points to take all the variation out of it and see what the parts were and really get the quality of the cars where they needed to be at the time.
Cool, thanks. All right, so how about some questions from the audience? We got a question, tell you what, let's give me one of these to give to the audience. Okay.
Thank you guys, appreciate what all you do and have done. We're all car people, we love competition. So I'm curious on the team, who was kind of like that systems leader that was driving requirements because competition breeds better cars? Was there anybody who was saying, oh yeah, you did a great job on the exterior, did a great job on the interior, but at the end of the day, we take it around the track, not good enough, so V10's awesome, but we got great suspension, do these things. How many iterations do you get to do and say, yeah, now we're gonna beat Corvette and we're gonna make a better car?
So I came in when we were doing Gen 4 also, and I remember having to go to Herb, and I wasn't the type who would grovel back then, so I pretty much was demanding. We butted heads a little bit at times because when we got rid of the run flat tires off the Gen 3 and did the Sport Cups, the newer Sport Cups, we had to redo the chassis, and that wasn't in the plan. We had to go, I think we went to the solid rear sway bar, we had to redo the shocks. That was the big question. It's like, we got to do this. It drives okay up to 710s, but when you're out of Michelin, driving at the limit, doing tire submissions, we've got to make those changes. And of course, we're came through. It always does. So, but what happens? The way you beat the system, because a lot of working at Viper and SRT is working around the system. And that's why you get more experienced guys in there, because you don't know how to work around the system unless you know the regular system. And the key again is we start working before they start the clock. We start working before we have money, And we had such good relationships with the big suppliers, the tires, the diff, the clutch, the trans, the dampers, the shocks. So we got them to do work for free on these things, and before things were approved, and that was the key to give us enough time to get it right. On Gen 5, again, we had that road wheel. We built in 2010. I think I put 10,000 miles on that car, right? And really lived with it. I think the only thing that was a push that we didn't, that was a struggle because we were on normal timing, was getting that radio, the new radio for the RAM, and getting all the software on the cluster and the radio working right. That was a struggle. And I was, because they would fix things with the next iteration. There's like an iteration almost every week. But they would break things because there's 200,000 miles of software. And so I would drive to Saginaw on Tuesday night, go see my folks. I'd go do 200 miles, and I would run through everything on the cluster, every possible thing you can do on the radio, on the drive there and back to do it, to hopefully catch things that the model system catch. But things get done right when you have the right people, and that's the key. It's all the people you have here. When we're just like you, right? As customers, we're just as big as car lovers, and some of us are lucky enough to get the chance to work on it. And when they give you that opportunity, you put everything into it. I mean, honestly, working on Viper was hard on my marriage, And I think her has a similar story too early on. But that's why you do it, right? That's why I became an engineer.
You know, we were blessed on the team from early on to have racers on the team, car guys and gals. And they would push the limits of the car. Guys like Neil Hanneman, who did the original handling on the first car, and guys like this guy, who came in behind a guy named Steve Lyman, who was also one of the ride and handling guys. And they're racers, so they understand what the car should feel like at the limit. So when you ask, you know, who was actually driving that, it was guys in my group that had the skill set to take the car out and literally beat the living shit out of it at the limit and come back and say things like, you know, we really need a little more swing, or we need a little more shock control. I mean, I sent Neil to Arizona, and I said, don't come back, just tell me how things are going, and I'd go and visit him once in a while. And he'd be out there 24/7 flogging the car in the Black Lake, you know, getting every little bit out of the car so that, you know, you folks can go out and say what a great piece it was. And then we got feedback from you guys, you racers. Came back and said, you know, we love the car. Did you ever think about this, that, and the other thing? And we would sit down and we had a relationship with you folks where we took that in and we said, you know, what, does this make sense? Is there a way we can do this? And what about, can we get a little more out of the brakes so they last a little bit longer? So you folks had input to that. And our team, because we love the car so darn much, anything that we could do to put that car another notch up the scale was something we were considering.
Just to build on that a little bit, and what Eric touched on, when we were doing the Gen 5 ACR, we looked at, you know, we knew we wanted to dominate, you know, the tracks and create something that was just out of this world from a performance standpoint. Remember, we actually looked at a supercharger on the V10, and I think we called it Sledgehammer. We always have fun naming our programs. We called that one Sledgehammer. I actually remember doing some design work on what the supercharger would look like. That went away, and then we said we can solve it with aero. And so to me, that was one of the coolest things ever, is that we were able to generate so much downforce. In fact, I remember the first time showing Ralph the wing, Mike Scheimling and I, and he's like, absolutely not gonna do that. But because it was a little, I think it's over the top, right? But to me, that's the spirit of what that car is about, and what was accomplished with the ACR just through aerodynamics and not throwing, you know, more horsepower at it, just refinement and suspension.
One great thing about the ACR is that it's got so much downforce, it's got so much going on, and so much grip. It's really at race car levels. Right? You got more than race car, you got more than, you know, IMSA GT levels of downforce, you got more than IMSA level GT levels of power. You just done it in slicks. And so that car is so racy. I know the customers like to talk to us, what setup should I put in the car? Because you have to make all this stuff adjustable to dial it in for the track. And the reality is, it's racy enough. You got to dial it in yourself. I can't tell you how to set it. It's going to change in the afternoon compared to the morning as the track temperatures change the right setup. Because it's pretty much is a race car, and that's what race cars are like. So I can't tell you what the right setup is. I can give a place to start, but you're going to have to dial that sucker in yourself. And I think that's what makes the car great, right? You never get tired. You never finish that car, because the world changes and you change your car with it. And you know, that's another thing about every Viper too, is that you never get bored driving a Viper. You know, I can drive a Corvette or a Mustang, a high-powered Mustang, and after about 3 days, I feel like, okay, yeah, I can get everything out of this car, I'm nice with this car. And the Viper's just not like that, right? The Viper has so much feedback, it just talks to you so much that, you know, it's a little nutty. So even driving in normal is an adventure, it's fun, right? That's really what, I mean, I can feel my goosebumps coming up just because of what it's like driving that car.
Thanks, guys. We got time for maybe one more question here, so.
How did the V10 come about? I heard that initially you were looking at maybe using a Lamborghini engine.
Well,
Dick should really be the one to talk
yeah,
about it.
Dick would definitely be the one to talk about it, but I can tell you a little bit about the early part of it. The car was gonna have a V10. And so, I mean, that was a given. And we didn't have the motor, but they sent Dick off, and the team sent Dick off to do some things at Lamborghini, primarily for casting. And so everybody gets, all the journalists want to say, well, it's like they say, well, Tom Gale designed the Viper. Well, it takes a lot of people to do it. And the same thing is true with the V10 motor. I mean, the Lamborghini provided some of the wherewithal for casting, but that's probably the end of it. So the bottom line is, and you guys can talk to it, but the bottom line is the car was going to have a V10. And the question is whether it was aluminum, boat anchor, heavy motor, or something else.
The essence of the car was built around the V10. And Dick will tell you that the only reason the reason the car exists was they were going to make this great motor and they needed something nice to put his motor in. That's what he'll tell you. But he'll also tell you that it is not a truck engine, was never going to be a truck engine, although in the grand scheme of things, it was like, let's build a sports car, we're going to have a V10 coming out for the truck and we can use that. And then somebody said, you know, that V10 weighs like 900 pounds of cast iron. So that ain't gonna work. And of course, it's not a Lamborghini engine. Dick will tell you that as well. But Lamborghini provided, you know, marvelous information and marvelous technology about large aluminum castings. And the chief engineers, I think his name was Figueroa, is that?
Mauro Figueroa.
Yeah.
He came from Ferrari to Lamborghini.
So he was very instrumental in helping design the way the engine should go together, some of the characteristics of the engine. But it was always going to be a V10, and then when we figured out if you couldn't put 900 pounds of motor in a front engine, it's actually, Bo used to call it, what was it, a front mid-engine car because the center line of the spark plug was behind the front axle, right?
Accessory drives behind the front end.
So you guys didn't like the engine we made for the concept car where we took a few V8s and cut them up and welded them back together to make a V10. So that just proved it was always going to be a V10.
It was an amazing engine to look at, but every time I turned the key, I'm like, oh God, please don't let this thing blow up on me right now. So that's really the story behind the engine. It was brand spanking new. It might have shared one or two bolts, Charlie, is that right? Something like that? Yeah, got a handful of pieces,
And
most of them fasteners.
And bore centers or something like that.
Great question.
All right, I could do this all afternoon, but unfortunately, we only have this much time allocated in our schedule, and these guys have to go to a lunch to honor some of these people. You can hang around for a few more minutes if anybody else has some questions you want to ask them, come on up and do that. But thank you guys for being here today.